You've chosen to talk a little bit about Chaucer, and I've asked for that panel to consider the humanizing influence of literature. Tell me what Chaucer would say to that.
So the way I cast my paper was to say that that I agree with so many of the panels that we've had. We've had some marvelous panels about how deeply literature doesn't humanize us, right? It doesn't make us human.
No,
We're
no.
humans as we
Right.
read literature, ipso facto. But in that sense that it activates our potentialities as humans, right? It seems to me that that's really what we're talking about when we say literature humanizes us, is that it activates our ability for wonder. It activates our potential for the beautiful. It activates our potential to begin to reflect on the moral lives of these characters and enter into those moral lives. But where I tried to do something a little Chaucerian and contrarian this year is I cast that. I've been thinking, as I think several people have, this is the 25th anniversary of Schindler's List. And there's that marvelous scene in Schindler's List, right, where Schindler comes into Itzhak Stern, played by Ben Kingsley,
Right.
and they're talking about the difficulties of what Stern has been kind of secretly doing behind Schindler's back. And he begins to talk about the camp commandant, Adam Goert. And he says he wouldn't be a bad man. He's really not a bad man. He loves good wine. He loves the ladies. He loves making money. And Kingsley's character, Itzhak Stern, says killing. And Schindler says, oh, he can't enjoy it. He can't enjoy that part of it. And Stern then relates the story of the camp commandant Goert. One time when a prisoner escaped, he lined up 25 prisoners, and he went behind every other one with a Luger and shot him in the back of the head. And we see that, of course, through Spielberg's amazing film. And we have to see this man that Schindler has just praised for, in a sense, having supposedly a humanizing education, do that, right? And Germany was, right, one of the sort of leaders of world culture.
Right.
It was the country of Goethe and Schiller and Beethoven and Bach. And so what I tried to raise the question, and I think this is a really important question we need to ask ourselves, those of us who teach literature and the arts, is to say, what could have happened in a culture that was supposedly so sophisticated, supposedly was the culture of all of these great artists and thinkers, that a man could do that. And then, as we know, many of them went back to their offices and their homes at night and put on Beethoven. So, and I think Chaucer has a fascinating answer for that. It's not that there's something wrong with literature, but there's something wrong with us if we don't learn literature in the right way. And that Chaucer has the Canterbury Tales, right? This amazing span of stories that in themselves are really wonderful, but then this framework that gets us to reflect on what do we do when we read stories, and why do we tell stories, and what's involved in our own egos in telling stories, what's involved in our own social interactions in telling stories, but also those of us who listen to stories and think about stories and interpret stories. What is happening to us, right? So we have the pardoner, for instance, thoroughly corrupt man, who pretends to give people absolution for sins when he can't even do that. But then he goes on to tell one of the most, moving and affecting stories of all. How do we put those two things together? And does the meaning of a story have anything to do with one's own intentions for telling that story? Can you be a corrupt storyteller and produce good art? I mean, we know Picasso, for instance, was a thoroughly corrupt human being. These recent Me Too revelations. Some of these people made excellent films, and we now know that they were really disgusting human beings while they made them. So the challenge there is the challenge to say, we really need to think deeply, not just about presenting our students good art. And this is, I think, one of the things that the classical education movement has done so well, right? Plenty of schools throw a good book in front of students from time to time, but we really think and I say we, that's really arrogant of me because I now feel like I'm a part of this.
You
movement.
You are.
But we think about how you need to present that. What are the questions you need to present students in seminar that will lead them to really enter into that work in a thoughtful way, and then turn, as Chaucer does, or in the last tale, which you know is a penitential handbook, and turn to ourselves, because I think Chaucer is trying to say, you can think about stories all you want to, you can think about art all you want to, but if you're not willing to turn that back to yourself, then you're going to miss the most important part of this whole process, and you better examine yourself carefully and examine those kinds of motivations. I don't think Goethe ever made it to the Parsons tale.
Right. No, that's right. Yeah, he
thought the stories were wonderful and the art is wonderful, but he's experiencing that on a purely kind of aesthetic funhouse.
Right, aesthetic funhouse.
Isn't it great that I can go back and hold my nose after smelling the fires from the ovens and listen to Beethoven and exist on my rarefied plane? That's not what classical education is doing. That's not what it's about, and it better not be about. But I don't think it is about, because I think the people who've conceived of it have really conceived of it as combining the true, the beautiful, and importantly, the good.
The good.
And how those overlap with how the beautiful can lead us to appreciate the good. How the true is crucial.
Sure. So tell us, are there any scenes there in Chaucer, in the Canterbury Tales, or if you want to be more American, this is putting you kind of on the spot since you haven't maybe read through Longfellow recently, but he was attempting with his own efforts at one point to write a Canterbury for the American experience of sorts, right? With
I actually don't know about this work.
Tales from West Side Inn.
But I think that so many artists, and now first of all, I mean, think about this. Chaucer's career is written over Dante. And Chaucer is constantly responding to Dante.
Sure.
And one, and the other great thing, right, that we learn in classical education is that all of these artists are responding to other artists.
Yeah.
That the grand tradition is that interaction with
that conversation,
and also attempts to compete with
competition, absolutely.
And so that sense of wanting to talk back.
Yep. We'll get you on Longfellow next year. Yeah. All right. So I'll have you read the tales again and.
But that would be
make
wonderful.
Those parallels. That'd be fun, right? But my question pertains to Chaucer, because, as you say, the final story is what provides the reader a chance to seek a right or righteous position in relation to.
And by the way, let me say that for the entire 20th century, no one understood it that way. They said, this has got to be an elaborate joke. It's this long thing that's not a tale. It's a penitential handbook. It's a prose exposition of the 7 deadly sins. And so, right in that,
and really for the 20th, for the vast majority of the 20th century,
it has to be ironic. It has to be ironic. He can't be taking this seriously. And then, of course, he follows it with the retractions, where he apologizes for any of the sins, any of the tales that might have led people into sin. And no high modernist would ever apologize for his art. So clearly this has got to be, we need to read this ironically. And I think the wonderful turn, and even the postmodernists, right, who just saw this as yet another discourse, I think the wonderful thing is that Chaucer's emerging as a postmodernist. He's the one who's
taking them all the way to their
He's
end.
The one who saw through all of those questions and all those presuppositions and said, there has to be something more here. And there is something more. There's truth.
There's truth. There's
beauty, and that if the art doesn't lead us, and importantly, goodness, and if the art doesn't lead us, right, through all of the searching questions, you don't take art in a simple way, and you don't take your own interpretations. Right, the clerk tells a tale, and he struggles to even understand his own tale.
Right.
The wife goes spinning off on 15 different ways. So, but she herself gets to several answers, but you have to interrogate those answers and question everything as you move through it. But again, to Chaucer, that doesn't mean there isn't truth. That doesn't mean there isn't goodness. It just means that you'd better be examining how you do this, and as I say, really crucially, examine your own motivations. And I think that depth of thoughtful self-reflection is what I'm seeing, and what I see in my own son, who, as you know, right, went went to 7th grade twice so he could get into a Great Heart School. So like you, I have a little skin in the game.
Yes, you
and
do.
I saw that it turned from school as a kind of mechanical set of, I've got to do this stuff, and they tell me I've got to do this stuff, to a 12-year-old boy coming home with joy and with fascination, with wonder. At the ways of the sloth, which was what he sort of began with, but also reciting to me the opening of Beowulf in Anglo-Saxon, and knowing that he then knew the interior of those words, because he'd had to commit them to himself, and he now possessed that marvelous introduction that ends with, "That was a good König," that was a good king. And that we lead to what makes for a great leader.
Good king, a great leader.
And he can reflect upon that because he now holds that.
He possesses that personally.